What is up, everybody? Welcome to the inaugural episode of DC Standom. I sure hope I don't mess this up, but we figured there was no better way to kick the show off than with the first DC movie and the first superhero movie of 2022. And it's a good one, folks. Matt Reeves The Batman feels like an important historic movie. I am your host, Den of Geek Editor-in-Chief Mike Cicchini, and with me this week, we have Den of Geek Managing Editor and unparalleled Batman expert John Saavedra, Den of Geek Senior Movies Editor David Crow, and as a special guest, massive DC fan and pop culture juggernaut Rosie Knight, whose bylines you probably know from Nerdist, a few at Den of Geek, and plenty of other outlets. Rosie, it's so good to see you again. I haven't seen you in ages. We are the veterans of several DC set visits together.
Yeah, it's so nice to see you and to be talking about DC again. Yeah, I mean, I think the last time we saw each other was probably something to do with Shazam. It's really been that long.
Yeah, we were on the Shazam set together. We were in the Aquaman edit bay together. So, folks, like, do not come at Rosie Knight about DC knowledge because she's got what it takes. So this is a good crew we have assembled here. This movie, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I think we were all pretty blown away by this. I saw it for the second time this week. I did not really expect it to affect me the way it did after two viewings, and yet here we are. So for everybody who's joining us, we are going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Obviously, if it's in the trailers, it's fair game. If it's something that we've talked about with the talent that we published in the latest issue of Den of Geek magazine, which we'll tell you how you can win some free copies of throughout the stream today. But we're going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. But what I ask from you is, I know several people in the chat, some of you have doubtless seen the movie by now because it's been in previews for the last couple of days. Try not to drop spoilers in the chat either. Let's be mindful of the folks who aren't going to get to see this until tomorrow, till Saturday, till Sunday. You know, we'll do our part if you do your part. This way everybody can enjoy this movie the way it's meant to be enjoyed. So let's get going. What did everybody think about this? David, as our senior movies editor, you reviewed this movie. You gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Usually you and I come at each other pretty hard about these movies, but I can't really find too much fault with that. Why don't you start us off today?
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a good place to begin is before I even saw it, you were texting me how this was, you know, I don't know if you used the word game changer, but that was the vibe I was getting off your text. And you and I usually have a disagreement with superhero movies a little bit. So I tried to keep a healthy degree of skepticism going in because, like a lot of folks, maybe even others on this call, when you first hear that they're making another Batman movie, the thought, at least I had, was, do we really need another Batman movie? Is there anything left to do with the character? And the answer is yes. There is. there is some overlap with previous incarnations of the character on screen. Yes, especially maybe Nolan, but Matt Reeves makes it his own, most of all by making it really, really good. I mean, there's so much conviction to this movie. I have even a colleague who didn't care for it as much. And she said, almost as a compliment, it's joyless in a way. And I understand what she means. It is entirely committed to its noir aesthetic, and it is probably the most original superhero movie we've seen, and I don't know, I would say maybe since Logan. So,
Rosie, how about you? You're wearing the Neil Adams Batman sweater to prove it. So I think you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I love this movie so much. I was not that stoked about it going into it. I love the idea of Robert Pattinson as Batman. I think that casting is brilliant. I thought Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman was brilliant. I mean, the whole cast seemed really great, but for me, the trailers seemed like kind of a retread of what had come before. But when I've seen the movie twice now too, and it is just not that at all. Like, I think it's so original. It's so beautifully shot. Like, the cinematographer, Greg Fraser, and Matt Reeves made something that is just so beautiful, so cinematic. It's that first real Batman as a detective in a live action movie. It's so cool, and it's so weirdly influenced by like Batman the animated series and Mask of the Phantasm, but it's also this really terrifying, scary, soulful film. I'm such a huge fan of this movie, and I liked it even more on the second time I saw it. I felt like that 3 hours just whooshed past. I was just like, whoa, I'm at the end. So yeah, no, I'm just a huge fan. I'm so excited for people to get to see it.
John, you are, of course, a massive Batman fan. You have written more about Batman for Den of Geek than probably anybody else in its history. And you wrote the cover story of the latest issue of Den of Geek magazine, where you spoke to Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson. And you had to write that story before you got to see the movie. So when you finally saw the movie, did it live up to your expectations? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, so I just wanna preface this first by saying that you saying that I have unparalleled Batman knowledge is setting me up for failure when Rosie Knight is on the call. Like, I like, you know, let's call it what it is. Rosie Knight's the expert here.
Teamwork.
But you know, I remember Mike, you and I went to the super secret, top secret screening like a couple weeks ago. And I think the first thing we did after the credits rolled was turn to each other and go, yeah, yup. Like for the first like minute of conversation, there were like no actual things being discussed. We're just like, yeah, like it was to me, I don't know, and I mean we'll get into this later. I don't know if it's the best Batman movie ever made, but I think it's maybe the comic book adaptation I've always wanted. Like it just felt so wholly Gotham City and the Batman comics I grew up reading. And I think that my favorite thing was really the Bruce Wayne aspect of it. Like I won't go into spoilers, but it's just something that me and Robert talked about in a cover story was how different this Bruce was from every other movie, and how much he enjoyed playing that Bruce. Like Robert really likes Robert Pattinson. I'm calling him Robert because I talked to him, but Robert Pattinson had he enjoys playing these sort of characters that are sort of on the fringe or loners or just straight up weirdos, and he totally gets to do that kind of material for this version of Bruce. Like he's not debonair, he's not a playboy, he wants basically nothing to do with Gotham City. Things he told me in the cover story, and that absolutely comes through, and I think that's the aspect I love the most. Like we're so used to for me, I think the only time I've read that version of Bruce is in The Dark Knight Returns, but that all happens so much later into his career, and here it's like right at the beginning. Like he just wants nothing to do. He lives on the fringes. He's a super weirdo, has a super dark outlook, and I really loved all of that as sort of setting up this completely different take without being super grimdark, without being even though it is kind of joyless, it makes sense, especially as you go through the rest of the movie. It sort of evolves into different things.
I think it's I was just gonna say, like, I do think I agree with you so much on the comic book aspect. Like I have read Year One so many times after watching this movie. Like they visually take so much. I don't think it's joyless. I actually think it's like very full of like heart and soul, and kind of the joy comes through in that way, and the joy comes through in like the love of comics and like the way that they portray Gotham and Bruce and this journey he's on, and the kind of ensemble of characters that he meets up with. And there's a lot of fun things that take from the comics and take from the previous adaptations in a way that to me made it like that. There's that scene in the trailer that everyone talked about where it's he says to Selena, like, you have a lot of cats, and she says, yeah, I have a thing about strays, and she's drinking milk. That actually sums up kind of the underlying energy and humor that I think actually is in this movie, even if you look past the kind of darkness and scariness. And it has a lot of cool things to say. It's not dark for no reason. It's very much a noir movie in that way. It's making a statement. And but it is cool to see a Batman noir movie. Like so many people have wanted this for so long, and it's really cool that they pulled it off.
Yeah, just to clarify, when I say joyless, I was quoting someone, but I don't mean it in the grimdark way either. To me, it's, as you mentioned, noir, and specifically to me, it plays a lot like neo-noirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Matt Reeves has mentioned Chinatown a lot in interviews, and John got him to mention Clute, which really comes through. And there's so many other touchstones of these kind of really downbeat and introspective movies that are more, frankly, dramas than they are action movies or thrillers. And that comes through in Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne, which I agree with John that to me, frankly, he plays a little bit like one of Pattinson's characters in one of his A24 movies. Like he reminds me of his character in Good Time or The Lighthouse, where he doesn't care about being Bruce Wayne. He just wants to keep on being that. He spends the first about hour of the movie in costume. We do not see a scene of him as Bruce Wayne, like out in public for the first hour of the film. And he's barely out of the mask. And to me, there's a weirdness there. There's obviously a love for the character from Reeves as well as the actor, but the darkness of the character comes through in a way that's both, it's somber, it's melancholy, but it's also highly entertaining, where you get the sense that, again, if he was like his character in The Lighthouse, they're just letting him go around dressed like the Bat because it makes him feel better. Like Jim Gordon's almost humoring him in a way, and so is Selina. And the way they play off of each other, she is now, I would say, the well-adjusted one, and she's just trying to help him come out of his storm clouds, if that makes sense.
We're going to talk more about Selina in a couple minutes, because as far as I'm concerned, she steals the entire movie. I am somebody who, I'm like really tired of Batman. Like I'm so tired of like just the endless dominance of Batman in pop culture. And of course, at every turn, Batman pop culture proves me wrong. Like Batman comics are fantastic right now. Like the stuff that Tom King has been doing and that Scott Snyder was doing before that, and that, you know, Josh Williamson is doing right now. And then we got Chip Zdarsky coming in on the comics. Like, so every time I'm like, oh God, I'm just so tired of Batman. Like, please tell stories with other characters. And then in particular, I'm so tired of early days Batman stories, especially on the big screen. Like we did this so well with the Nolan movies. Why are we revisiting this era again? And then here comes this movie and just does it so well and changes what you think the potential of that kind of story is. I never saw that coming in a million years. I got the same vibes watching this that I remember getting when I saw Batman Begins for the first time in 2005, where I watched Batman Begins in 2005 and I said, wow, they can really do anything with a superhero movie now. Like they actually let this director make this movie that does not at all feel like the kind of blockbustery Batman movies that we've had in the past. They can really do anything now. I can't wait till the Superman Returns comes out next year. And of course we know how that turned out. But like, this was the same kind of vibe I got out of the Batman, where the whole time I'm watching it, I'm sitting there going, they really just let this director do exactly what he wanted. And, you know, it's quite a gamble to take, and it doesn't always work out. So I'm really happy with this.
I think that you touch on like one of the things that Warner Brothers is doing best now, that really, and as you say, has been going on for like quite a long time, but especially right now, like they are giving directors a level of creative freedom that we have not seen. And for better or for worse, like there's people who love some of these movies, there's people who dislike some of them, but like the fact that this movie exists in the same time and space as Aquaman, which is a movie I personally love, but that is a movie where they let one director do something absolutely different, as far from this and kind of what people expect from superhero movies in James Wan, you know, and then you have this movie, which is as far from that as you can think of, but it's still so brilliant and so different. And I think there's a real power to that creative vision, because like this is Matt Reeves' vision. This movie is 3 hours long. It's a humanist story about Batman. It's this year very influenced by year one, but it's his second year, you know. It's so weird and scary and thoughtful and just not at all what I expected it to be. And I think it really comes from that same seed, like you were saying, Mike, of them just letting a director do what they want with a movie and sort of just giving them that free rein to completely reimagine you know, Gotham and Batman, who, like you said, that's a cultural icon. Batman is, in comics, we always joke, like the rumor was that like that the amount of comics that Batman sold was how they worked out comic sales for everyone else at Diamond, was just based on how many Batman sold, because it would always be the biggest seller, you know. And he's that much of a big deal. And I think that from the moment they cast Robert Pattinson, post, like David said, you know, Good Times, The Lighthouse, Cosmopolis, like you knew that they were going to do something different. And I think it delivers on that promise.
I kind of agree with Mike in terms of Batman movies. Like, I never don't want new Batman to come out. But there was sort of fatigue on my end after, you know, 2 different takes in the last decade or however long it's been. But, you know, like I read this on Twitter, like you wouldn't, you know, Batman being DC's, I'm like all for DC movies centering other superheroes that we haven't seen before. Like I would like to see sort of like the weirder aspects and the B-list heroes and villains and all that. But you know, you wouldn't tell McDonald's to stop selling French fries, its biggest and most popular product. So you can't expect WB to ever stop making Batman movies, right? So you sort of have to ride that. But like the one thing I wanted to say is another thing I really loved is how standalone it feels, how sort of impenetrable the atmosphere and the tone of this movie feels, where it's like there is no way that any other superhero could possibly exist within this universe. And I really think Batman movies and Batman in general, in my opinion, in comics works best when it is just Batman. You know, I really like that sort of like an impenetrableness of like Gotham sort of existing in its own bubble. That's something where I didn't have to worry about any other connections. And you know, I know that, you know, a good Justice League movie is obviously something people really like want to see or have gotten. They want to see these connections as well. But for me, who isn't, you know, super invested in sort of like the cinematic universe approach to doing things, I really love that certain DC things can just feel like their own things without having to, you know, have sort of like the Leo DiCaprio moment of like, look, there's that connection to this, here's that connection to that. Like this has tons of that. I would say it never feels so like glaring. There's maybe a couple you know, instances where I would say that like I personally rolled my eyes. I won't go into them here, but Mike knows which ones they are. But for the most part, it doesn't feel like, you know, like they're flashing it across your face, like look, Easter egg, or look, connection to Superman, or look, connection to Aquaman, which I also love the Aquaman movie, but I'm sort of glad that exists over there, you know. And it's not like you're not going to get the Batman universe anyways, because they're doing all these HBO Max shows. Like I think today, like one of the report, like Matt Reeves said that they're already working on an Arkham Asylum spinoff, which I would love to see. There's a GCPD spinoff. I think that's still in the works. There's the Penguin spinoff. So we're going to get a lot of that, but it sort of like exists within like the bubble world of this Gotham. And I just absolutely love that about this universe.
And to tie into what all of y'all are saying, I think it was, I know I'm telling comic book fans here amongst y'all, so you can correct me, but I think it was Danny O'Neill said, the appeal of Batman is the character's elasticity more than any other superhero. There's a certain way readers in comics expect Superman to be portrayed. There's a certain way that Spider-Man is expected to be portrayed. But with Batman, the character's very elastic. He's very easy to transform into whatever the artist wants to do. And on the page, you saw that from, you know, Bob Kane to Frank Miller and everything in between. And I think it was the Dick Springer years that inspired Batman, the 1966 TV series. And then you have obviously Burton, Nolan, etc. And yeah, so on screen, there is that elasticity, and that this has some thematic overlap with what we've seen before. It's a Batman movie, but the ability Matt Reeves had to just kind of boil it down to a movie that again feels like a neo-noir, but also is still in that universe more than I would say any Batman movie we've seen before. You get the sense that Nolan's Gotham felt like a real city in the sense that it was huge, and you felt there were all these different elements. But you feel in Reeves's Gotham, not only does it feel probably more grounded than some fans might expect, but it feels like it's the jumping off point of this entire mythology of characters. And yes, there's clearly no Superman in this universe, but this is Reeves's interpretation of the character, and it just works. It comes through, and it just feels like we're seeing the tip of the iceberg in this movie.
On the other hand, though, I wouldn't mind if there was a DC universe happening in the background. Like, we don't have to see it. Like, but I would love, I've been dying forever for somebody to get Superman as right on screen as Matt Reeves gets Batman right in this movie. Like, what is the Superman equivalent of this movie? Set, all in the daytime, and that is as hopeful and chrome skyline and gleaming as this movie is not. Like, what is the equivalent of that for a Superman movie? And if they wanted to eventually create a new corner of the DCEU that this is just simply the beginning of, I would be okay with it. Like, and that doesn't mean that everything has to build to a big crossover. Personally, I rather like the way the DCEU has been the last few years, where they are letting these directors like play in their own sandboxes. They're all vaguely connected. Maybe they'll reference them, maybe they won't. But that's all it ever really needs to be. I got news for you. Like, even the MCU, like the early days of the MCU, just the fact that they would even acknowledge that these movies took place together, that was enough. Like, that was enough. As somebody who, like, I feel like a lot of viewers like have forgotten the dark days of the 1990s and the early 2000s. Like, so like just the idea that they would even acknowledge that these other characters exist, for some of us, that's enough. And if that's all we get, and we are allowing great directors to tell great and distinctive stories, not at the expense of anything else, I'm cool with that too. But
yeah,
I know David's given me this look that he always gives me. And I promise you, I'm not arguing for like that this movie would be better if it was more explicitly part of a cinematic universe. I promise that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a quote from a couple of years ago, before this movie was like massively delayed, like every other movie, where one of the WB execs kind of hinted, they were talking about the multiverse, right? And now we're in a space where we have a cultural understanding of the multiverse like never before. This is not just people who've read Crisis. Like, everyone knows what the multiverse is now, because it's one of the biggest movies of all time, introduced a lot of people to that if they didn't know before. So I think the best thing about these DC movies is, like, one of the execs had said something about, this is on one Earth and you can have something else on another Earth. And I think that's kind of what DC is leading to. I think you can have movies like this. Like, when I came out of this movie, I was like, wow, if I was a kid, I would love this movie because I love scary stuff. But there's going to be a lot of kids who can't see this movie, or who the beginning of it will really scare them. And I was like, but that's okay, because we're also about to have the Flash movie that's going to be the No Way Home-esque Easter eggs, interconnected universes. And I think what's really cool about where we are now is, like, these things can exist alongside each other. So the dark Batman, Matt Reeves, neo-noir universe can also exist alongside the more kid-friendly Black Adam, kind of fun Shazam style things. And I think that is the best way for it to be, that there can be all different kinds of things for all different kinds of people. And that makes me really excited. And I hope that is the way forward.
I'm jumping off of something Rosie said, and, we don't have to get into this, but I do agree. Like, I like the fact that DC movies can just be like, this one takes place on this Earth and this one takes place on that Earth. What I'm not looking forward to, and again, we don't have to get into it because it's a completely different movie, is the flashover explaining that. And they absolutely will. And it's going to be, listen, I can't help but to stand the fact that Michael Keaton's coming back for this movie, but it's going to be like, will there be now a Robert Pattinson cameo, or like, just like you'll see him in like a picture, like on a monitor of like all the Earths, and then it's like, oh, there's Robert Pattinson, and here's X hero and X world, and that part I'm not super looking forward to. Like, right now it feels good because it's like we don't have to over explain. It's sort of like how cinematic universes or modern blockbusters have to explain recastings or don't want to recast people, and then instead like, graft CGI faces onto other actors, like that sort of like unflexibility I'm not really looking forward to, because like the DC's absolutely going to over explain this, I think, and I'm already like stealing myself for it. But anyways, this completely different
Don't
conversation.
worry, the Flash might never come out. That movie's meant to come out every year, so you just keep it. It's the DC's Morbius. It's like, is it real?
Like I just thought, like Joker was its own thing. This is its own thing, and I love that. And one thing could be a thing I enjoy, the other thing could be a thing I don't enjoy, but it doesn't have to be like all connected. Like I like that it's not all connected.
Give it. I was just gonna say, give it 10 years, and you'll have Robert Pattinson and Michael Keaton and Christian Bale hugging it out. And
yeah, I just don't want that, like, that Spectre moment where Blofeld. I mean, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Spectre. Like from like 10 years ago or however long it's been, where Blofeld tells Bond, I'm like the architect of all your pain, connecting everything, like it all connects. And like I don't want to see that. Like I don't want that. I just want it to be its own thing. Like we don't need to explain every single aspect of everything.
I actually think James Bond is kind of a really great comparison to Batman, actually, and what the power of Batman can be, which is like everyone has their own favorite James Bond. And for, like you said, they've tried to connect it. Whether or not you take that continuity is fine, but like everyone has their own generation of James Bond. Everyone has a James Bond that they like more or they don't like more. And James Bond goes on one adventure here and you can like it, and he goes on another one there and you can not like it. And Batman is very much that in the world of comics. Like everyone has their own favorite Batman. Everyone can enjoy these kind of different Batman stories. And to me, I'm really excited to see where this one falls for people, because it does feel kind of like I don't feel like it has a direct analog to any James Bond movie in the way that like Casino Royale and Batman Begins are probably pretty similar when it comes to tone shift. But I just think I love talking to people about their favorite Batman. And I think that this is a really interesting movie because for a lot of people of our generation, there's always been that conversation of like, is Kevin Conroy the ultimate Batman? Is Batman the animated series the best Batman? Is Mask of the Phantasm the best Batman movie? And this is a movie that is in conversation with that conversation and is made by someone who clearly loves those things in a way that a lot of other movies don't. So it had the impact of the animated stuff and also some of the animated movies, which I won't get into because of spoilers, but you're going to basically, after watching this, be in a joy of animated revisiting, because there's just so much. And I just think that's something that feels very unique and special about this iteration of Batman.
We are getting a question in the comments. Like some folks have been asking about the runtime because this is an almost 3-hour long Batman movie. How does everybody feel? Is this movie too long?
I don't want to be gross, but I did have to like go to the bathroom like an hour and a half into this movie, and then I had to sit through the other hour and 20 minutes of it, which again, like it doesn't feel long, but I do feel like movies are too long in general, always, all of the time.
Yeah.
So
I'm a proponent of like the 90-minute movie. I talk about it a lot. I write about it a lot, and I'm usually like 90 minutes, like 100 minutes, like da-da-da. But I have to say, I've seen this movie twice, and a lot of what I thought about after the first time I saw it was, it didn't feel too long, but is there a way I would trim it down? And I have to say 100% after the second time, I'm like, no, I actually think I'm like, I can't, even though I'm not an editor, so probably all my opinions on that are absolutely null and void because these movies are made by people with a vision. But this is a movie that I actually think all those moments of like slowness and atmosphere and vibes, it's a very like vibey movie. Like if you actually describe the plot, it takes up like a paragraph. But like my feeling is actually everything, the way I enjoyed the movie and the things that spoke to me about it, every part of it is earned. And I actually think, I never thought I'd be like, yeah, here's a 3-hour Batman movie that I don't think is too long. But for me personally, I really enjoyed it. I'm actually going to see it for a third time soon because I think it's so good. So for me, it's not too long, but I do think 3 hours is too long for a movie in general. So yeah. I understand people's wariness.
Like David's going to absolutely disagree with me, but movies need to chill. They just
I would
need,
agree.
they just need to chill. Like I would say the same for series. Series are also way too long. But movies really need to
Watch
chill.
British TV. Everything's like 4 or 6
like
episodes.
I would like I'm a big fan of 2001 A Space Odyssey, and I would like the interlude to come back. Like I think we should revive the interlude. Like that should be a thing again.
I actually do agree with that.
The Batman wouldn't need an intermission because, at the risk of being the first one to be critical about the movie on here, like I don't think generally for most of its running time it's too long. I think the first 2.5 hours fly by. And I agree with Rosie that it's surprising how intimate it all plays. Like, I mean, to be fair, I think 2 of the 3 Nolan movies are close to 3 hours, or one of them's 2.5 anyway. But those are very propulsive. They're not just plot driven, they're very spectacle driven. This movie, I wouldn't say needs an intermission because to me it isn't a spectacle movie, even though there are action scenes. Although a surprisingly small, a relatively small amount for a modern blockbuster. It is about the characters. It's about Bruce's relationship with specifically Selina, but also with Gordon, his relationship with the city, and just almost a character study of this, frankly, a very depressed Batman. But it is very entertaining to watch in that regard, and the labyrinthine plotting just grips you the whole way through. And you just get to study these characters and the world they live in. With that said, I think without giving away spoilers, there is a point near the 2.5 hour mark where it could end and it doesn't. And that there is essentially a 4th act to the movie. And I know some people on this call are going to disagree, but I think that basically the very last, we'll say 20 or so minutes, to me plays a little bit like there was a note somewhere that this needed to have a Christopher Nolan-like sequence of spectacle. And I don't think the movie needed it. And so, yeah, I think the last 20 minutes, I was starting to be like, they need to wrap this up. This is very obligatory.
Yeah, I would just want to say I feel really bad, David, because you're wrong. And it's
settle down, be loving, John.
I mean that with all the love of my heart. No, but without going into spoilers, I absolutely love the 4th act, as you call it, specifically because of the specific influence, which is something I just love from like a formative Batman fan perspective.
Fan service does not make a good storytelling, John.
I will be the mediator. I love the ending, and I think it's entirely earned, and I think that it is part of what made me love the movie, and I'm very excited to see how people respond to it in correlation with the rest of the movie. But I will say the one thing that David is saying that I think is absolutely objectively is just true. There is a turning point in that segment where it would have been a different movie if that wasn't at the end. I love the movie that it is because of it, but there is a different version where it could have stopped. I'm glad they didn't, even though I think it's jarring on purpose. I think that's the point of it. And it does, I would just say, because we, like you said, we can't get into spoilers. This is a movie that takes so much from comic books. If you love Batman comic books, you are going to be so happy because there's going to be at least one comic book that was formative to you that you loved, or some weird back issue that you picked up that you never expected, or a trade that you got secondhand at your favorite local comic shop, and it will be referenced here. Like, this is a movie that loves comic books, and that ending, so many people I talk to were just like, what? Are we there? Like, is this what this is? And I've already had like 4 or 5 different comics that people have seen that it takes from, and I think that excitement of where it can go and what can happen when you tell a story with a love of comics, from the most absolutely interior 4-issue miniseries like Year One, to these huge bombastic kind of event comics. And Batman somehow, I mean, there's even like really funny, weird, in the darkest moments, they're pulling from like really ridiculous like late stage detective comic stuff with these references to like different tech that they use, and it's so much fun to see it. And I think that's that's another thing that I think people will really love about this movie, even if there's something about it where the storytelling diverges from what you were hoping or what you were liking about the movie. I think you're going to be able to find some really fun influences that, like John said, like a lot of this stuff when I was watching it, I was like, this is speaking to me on the kid who's looking through the back issues trying to find a dollar, like a quarter bin, you know, kind of comic, in a way that a lot of the movies haven't done. And even though like a lot of movies in the past have been very comic book influenced visually, Batman movies, and obviously they're all influenced by comic books because they're taking characters from the comics and story and kind of readapting storylines. This feels like the texture of the movie is built from panels from comics and moments. And, you know, this is the version we see of Selina visually and in some other aspects. It's David Mazzucchelli's Year One Selina. And it's incredible to see that brought to life on screen. And Zoe is so brilliant. So the more I think about it, I want to go back and watch it just to be more thoughtful even about the comic book stuff and make like more reading lists for myself. Like, what do I need to read after this? And that's a lovely feeling to have in the face of the kind of way that corporate blockbuster comics are. If this can drive a bunch of people into the comic book shop trying to buy Batman comics, that's my favorite thing that can happen.
Just going off of something Rosie said, I'm working on the Easter egg for this movie for Den of Geek, which you can read on denofgeek.com later this week. Shameless plug.
Nicely done.
And I'm working on it. I'm 2,200 words in and still going. I just keep finding things. And yeah, it's comic book stuff. It's movie stuff. It's real life stuff. Like there's just so much.
Yeah.
There's just so much to find. And he puts so much detail. Like I absolutely love everything about that aspect of it. Absolutely. And I'm not one that like usually jumps to Easter eggs, but I think it's done in such a way where it's not super flashy. You know, I think there's other universes that maybe are a little bit more shameless in their Easter egg insertion in movies, but I think that for the most part, Reeves is able to create a justification for the Easter egg or the homage or the tribute, and I really like that.
I mean, if people know me or have ever read my work, they know that I am like an Easter egg fiend, and I am probably to blame for a lot of the way that people talk about Easter eggs. I love them. I love that they're built into the text of things. I love the fun of a throwaway Easter egg. But I have to say, I watched this movie. I was like, this is not really a very Easter eggy movie. That's just not how it is. And then I did Easter eggs, and I was like, oh, that's not true. It's just a different kind. This is not Thor's hammer at the end of in a stinger, you know. It's not that thing where it's not somebody saying that they're from S.H.I.E.L.D. It's a different kind of way that he uses comic books and the DC universe to texturalize the movie. And also, as you said, there's like real world stuff in there. There's so much movie stuff. I mean, David, you brought up Clute, and that is obviously like such a huge influence on Selina and Bruce's relationship and kind of the representation of Selina and her story in the movie. And that's just so cool.
Speaking of some of the real world Easter eggs, I did speak to Paul Dano about, you know, the influence of the Zodiac Killer on the Riddler performance. And so we have a little clip of Paul Dano talking about the Riddler and Jeffrey Wright on his awesome interpretation of Lieutenant Jim Gordon. And then we'll come back. We'll talk some more about the cast. And then, folks, we have details on an amazing Batman comics giveaway that I'm almost like afraid to speak out into the world because it seems like a scam when we show off what we're giving away here, thanks to our partners over at eBay. So we're going to check out this clip. We'll come back. We'll talk about Batman some more, and then we're going to give away some cool free stuff. Paul, this is a very different take on the Riddler. How much of this, like, how was this pitched to you by Matt? Because he seems to have a lot of backstory already written out for these characters. And this is like very influenced by the Zodiac Killer and all this other stuff. So how did you create this?
Yeah, so Matt is, he is so thorough and meticulous himself. From the first conversation, even though this iteration of the character maybe seemed like a bit of a risk just based on fan expectation, I had so much confidence in him just from our first conversation. I knew that we could hopefully do something special with this film. Matt did reference the Zodiac Killer, but that really only took me so far. For me, it was more about the backstory, which you mentioned, and who he was and why he felt perhaps so full of shame and self-hatred and unnurtured by this city, and then for somebody who's so powerless in that backstory to then don this mask that I think does release power. So for me, the emotional backstory was way more important than any real life sort of serial killer reference.
And Jeffrey, this is the most hands-on Jim Gordon I think we've ever seen on screen. Was that one of the things that appealed to you about playing this character, or how was this kind of brought to you in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Matt very cleverly decided, one, that we're in year 2 of Batman's story, but also that Gordon is still a lieutenant, which gives him the opportunity to be more active and to be in the middle of the grime of the city, and also in the middle of the core of the plot, because we're focused on these mysteries, this set of mysteries. And as well, we're celebrating Batman as the world's greatest detective. So Gordon is alongside him, and they bring their detective skills together in a way that I don't think we've necessarily delved into too deeply in the past, but is very much in line with the history of the franchise. So yeah, no, I was excited to see that Gordon was so central to Matt's vision for this thing, and was excited to play it.
Thank you both so much. I got to tell you, Paul Dano is like way more like good vibes than you would expect him to be. That was the first time I'd ever spoken to him, and he was just like the most thoughtful, like he just gives the most like thoughtful, polite, incredible answer. And this was like the day after I had just been terrified by him as the Riddler. But yeah, this is of course he kind of gave the expected answer here, where he felt that the Zodiac Killer thing only kind of takes a portrayal of a character so far, even though it very clearly influenced Matt Reeves' version of this character in a number of ways. But this cast overall is spectacular, and I feel like this is as close to like definitive versions of some of these characters as I think we're ever likely to see. Dano is great in everything, and his Riddler is fascinating here. I don't know if I would consider this the definitive Riddler, but that's also because there's not really a definitive Riddler in the comics either, but this is a definitive Riddler. It's a new version of the character. It's almost completely reinvented in a lot of ways. Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon is fantastic, and it's tough. Like, how do you follow Gary Oldman, who was very much, I feel, the definitive Jim Gordon, and Wright brings something very different to the character here. And I really hope that we get this character explored more. Like, I want to know more about this guy's interior life. What Colin Farrell does with the Penguin is just completely out of control. And I can't wait to spend more time with that character. Aside from the fact that he's unrecognizable under the makeup, I think that kind of undersells how great his actual performance is and the potential that this character has for the future. And I can really safely say that there has never been a better Catwoman than Zoe Kravitz, and there have been some great Catwoman performances. But to me, this is the definitive Selina Kyle in ways that I don't think we've ever even approached. But what does everybody else think about this crew? It's amazing that you can have this many villains in a movie and not have it feel overstuffed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think like Zoe is so unbelievable as Selena. And I think the reason that this feels so definitive is, and her and Matt have talked about this quite a lot, like this isn't really Catwoman, this is Selena. Matt, at this Q&A I went to, he said, this isn't an origin story for Bruce, but it is an origin story for every rogue that you meet. And I think the reason this feels so definitive and powerful and kind of, one, Zoe's incredible, but also this is Selena. We're meeting Selena. This is a movie that's focused on Selena the whole time. And not only that, she has agency. She has an interior life. I love, the thing I will say that is not a spoiler, I love the stories Matt Reeves used this movie to tell. And Selena's is one of those stories that feels so absolutely different to anything that we've seen in superhero movies. The kind of people who get to be in a superhero movie, the things that she says, the things she talks about, the things she cares about. And Zoe is so cool. And I just, to me, this is the best. I love Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman is like, obviously, I love Batman Returns. I love the Tim Burton stuff. But to me, this is like a definitive Selena Kyle. I also just have to say as well, because like, I know we could all talk about Zoe all day, but for me, like Jeffrey Wright is like the best Gordon. I loved the representation of Gordon in this movie. I thought that without him, I actually think that the noir cell is a lot harder, because the way he delivers his lines and the banter that he has with this deadpan Batman is so noir. He's quippy, he's quick, he's funny, he's kind of, it's so good. And he is, to me, that to me is definitive Jim Gordon. Like that's what he should be and what he stands for, and the way there's a lot of really, really small, subtle choices Matt made in this movie that I think makes this Jim Gordon really interesting. And I kind of love that everyone in this movie is like an absolute weirdo, right? We know that, that's the point. And I love that Jim Gordon doesn't seem like a weirdo, but he just takes Batman everywhere, and that is the weirdo part. Like he just shows up places with a guy dressed as a bat. Like everyone has their weird thing, and that is Jim's, because for some reason he can see something, and they have a lot of fun. We've seen some stuff in the trailers, like those two together. There's some stuff in these opening sequences that are really dark, that you kind of got a hint of in the first trailer, but Matt plays some of them for laughs, like with the juxtaposition between Batman and Gordon and kind of how they interact in each other's worlds. So I thought Jeffrey Wright was so great. And I'm just like...
Yeah, I'll add to that I really did like Jeffrey Wright. I hesitate to say definitive, but to me, again, the thing is the movie really focuses on how weird it would be to have some guy dressed as, a bat walking around a crime scene. And you're seeing it from the other cops' point of view. What the hell is he doing here? This guy's a nut job. And Gordon's like, yeah, but he's good at it. So, just let him do his thing. But I did just want to add, and then I'll hand it over to John. I don't know if there is a definitive Catwoman. I've liked many of them. Julie Newmar, obviously, Eartha Kitt. Michelle Pfeiffer, I still think is one of the best performances in any comic book movie ever. Though that's not the comic book Selena, but it's wonderful. I like Anne Hathaway's Selena a lot. I think she's underrated, and I think she also pulls from year one. But the thing about Zoe that I would give the edge over a lot of them is what you were talking about, this interior life that I liked Anne Hathaway's Catwoman quite a bit, which was pulling from similar material. It's the modern version of the character, but we don't get to spend a lot of time with her and how she lives her life. And we do with Zoe. And not just that, we see Batman through her eyes, and we see this world through her eyes. And that just makes her so much more compelling and interesting. I mentioned before, she's the well-adjusted one. She is able to critique, without it giving away spoilers, she can tell Batman comes from money just by the way he talks. And she can critique his privilege. She is showing Batman the complexity of the world, as opposed to him being a bat god who knows everything. And to me, that's just a fantastic dynamic. And I will say, it is the definitive Bat-Cat relationship we've seen in any film.
Yeah, I just want to agree with both of you, basically. I do think that this Gordon and this Batman is my definitive version of that dynamic. Like he's because even in the comics, it's usually, you know, a little weird. Like I'm thinking of like, I don't know, that sort of like fish out of water, like super heavy. Like if you're talking like modern Scott Snyder, like that super heavy, like, you know, where James Gordon sort of becomes Batman in that comic book arc, and it's like, wait, this is insane, this is weird, what am I doing? You know, like the insanity of it, sort of like, because he's living it firsthand, and I sort of get that sense too in this, where he's like, yeah, let him in. First of all, I also thought in that very first trailer how weird it was to sort of see Batman in a crime scene, or like walking through that whole like sea of cops, because you get a little bit of that in the Nolan films, but it usually pops up like after, from the shadows, like after the cops have left, and it's just him, Gordon, and Harvey, or whatever, like in the bank vault scene. You know, he's sort of like hidden away. But in this, he's just like out in the open, and you're right, Rosie. It does play pretty funny at times. Like he doesn't seem to fit in at all, but he is obviously the most like expert detective of the entire group. So I really just absolutely love the dynamic, and there's so many funny lines. There's one specific one in the Easter egg guide that you'll be able to read, like that I just absolutely love. And then yeah, I think that Zoe, for me, there isn't. I agree with David. There isn't a definitive Catwoman for me. Like I love them all for very different reasons. I haven't actually spent that much time with the Batman 66 stuff. To my shame, I need to go back, and I know, because I know that Eartha Kitt is apparently amazing.
Arthur is the blueprint.
I haven't spent much time with it since I, like, maybe when I was a little kid, but never like gone through the whole series. But yeah, I absolutely love Michelle Pfeiffer for very specific reasons. Like Batman Returns is low key probably my favorite Batman movie. Subjectively, not objectively.
Also, Matt, when I spoke to Matt Reeves, he said that's one of his favorites. Like ages ago when I spoke to him when he was making the movie. And I actually think this movie has a lot of Batman Returns in it. Like you can see it's the influence of somebody else who loves Batman Returns, even if it's a very different movie.
Yeah, it's like the freak, the sort of like freak aspect of it.
Bruce Wayne is a weirdo.
Yeah. Like I absolutely love all that. And yeah, like interesting that he said that, because there is that sort of like Tim Burton also just got to do whatever the hell he wanted for Batman Returns, and that's what he gets to do in the Batman. I'm pretty sure just do whatever he wants. And I think it's a better movie for it. So yeah, no, I absolutely agree with both of you.
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump off something, because you were talking about Batman 66, and this is something I was talking about before. It's something I've written an article about over at Nerdist, but like this movie, it doesn't really exist without Batman 66, which seems completely ridiculous because like it's so different tonally. But Matt Reeves did an interview with Esquire Middle East where he was, and I heard him talk about this at the Q&A, where he said, you know, he was like a kid when Batman 66 came out. And to him, I think the quote is like the costume, the Batmobile, it was all very captivating. Like he didn't think there was anything funny about it. He just thought it was cool, right? So there's that, like that's his first kind of taste of Batman. But also, if you look at the villain setup, the Riddler, you know, the Penguin, Catwoman, that is a classic Batman 66 kind of space. And you guys were talking about how there's no definitive Riddler. And, you know, the Riddler had only been in 3 issues before he was in Batman 66. So like that kind of redefined who the Riddler was, and also brought Catwoman back into the public consciousness after 12 years away, probably because of the Wortham trials and the Wortham depositions and the American Comic Book Code. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of couldn't have happened without Batman 66 with these characters. And I just think that's so cool. Like that, I just think I love to see the seeds of everything that influenced all these different things, even if they seem so different, like Batman Returns and Batman 66.
The Batman 66 stuff here, you know, it's tough for me not to go on a tangent because I love Batman 66 so much, but it's also a perfect segue into this vintage comics giveaway that we're doing, because we're giving away some really, really cool comics, Silver Age and Bronze Age Batman comics, courtesy of our partners at eBay. And I think we should show off what we're giving and let people know how they can enter and win some of these, because they're really, really cool. So as you can see, we have 3 amazing vintage Batman issues that we're giving away in partnership with our friends at eBay. So you can win one of 3 CGC graded classic Batman comic books. For starters, you need to be following us on Instagram. We are at Den of Geek on Instagram. So make sure you're following us there. Now, how do you enter to win these? No purchase necessary. You just tag the biggest Batman fan in your life for a chance to win. Who's the person that you absolutely must go see the Batman with? Who's the first person you're going to call anytime there's a new announcement or trailer about a Batman movie or a TV show or a comic? Who's the person you can't wait to talk about this movie with? I know it ain't me. Tag them when you're following us on Instagram, and that will make you eligible to win one of these comics. These comics are awesome, okay? To celebrate the premiere of The Batman, we're giving away original copies of Batman number 139. Now, this is the issue that introduced the original Batgirl. That's Bat-Girl. This isn't Barbara Gordon. This is Betty Kane, who was kind of like she was like a tennis star, and she was the niece of the original Batwoman, Kathy Kane. So these characters hung around for a while, and then they were kind of, shuffled out of continuity to make room for Barbara Gordon in the late 60s. And then they were kind of wiped out by Crisis on Infinite Earths, but we don't need to get into that right now. We're also giving away Batman number 155, which is one of the earliest Penguin stories. Don't forget, a lot of these Batman villains, as Rosie alluded to when we were talking about Batman 66 before, they were not as pervasive in the Batman comics until they became pop culture phenomenon with the TV show in the 60s. So like character like the Penguin wasn't showing up all the time. So Batman 155 is a relatively early Penguin story. And of course, for the Nolan fans, we're giving away Batman number 232, which is the first appearance of Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul, depending on whether you want to go with the Nolan pronunciation or the animated series pronunciation. Take your pick. So we only have one copy of each of these. You will only be eligible to win one issue. So 3 lucky winners. One of you will get one of you will get another, one of you will get another. The winners will be randomly drawn after midnight on March 9th. Winners will be contacted via direct message on Instagram. Remember, you must be following Den of Geek on Instagram at Den of Geek, and you must reply within 48 hours in order to claim your prize. Otherwise, another lucky winner will be chosen. Remember, no purchase necessary. Make sure you're following Den of Geek on Instagram and tag the biggest Batman fan in your life and tell them why they're being tagged, and you can win one of these really cool issues. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? And David, John, Rosie, unfortunately, the 4 of us are not eligible, nor are any Den of Geek staff, contributors, or members of our family. Like, this is the legalese that I have to read out. So we should start wrapping this up soon, because I know that the 4 of us could talk about this movie for approximately the runtime of the movie itself. But I'm going to put everybody on the spot here. Where does this movie sit in your top 5 Batman movies? Rosie, why don't you go first?
I feel like she was the person that least wanted to go first.
No, that's why I threw it to her.
I have Batman. I have Bat opinions, okay? And this to me is it's definitely in my top 5. I think at the moment it's probably number 1, but that's because it does change a lot. So I usually go between Batman 1989 and Batman Returns being my faves. Those are the ones that I love. They're the ones that kind of really spoke to me and that were very formative in my understanding of what Batman is, which is really funny because comic book wise, there's a lot of stuff that Batman would never do in those movies. So I'm probably Batman 89, the Batman at the moment, Batman 89, Batman Returns, that switches around. Don't troll me, people, but then I'm Batman and Robin. That's like one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yes.
Like, absolutely no question. I've written about it a lot. And then it's Mask of the Phantasm for me. Those are the way that they are. They switch and change. But I also really love Batman 66. I would really implore you all to go and watch it. I have a broadcast antenna, so I watch it a lot because it's just on TV, but I'm pretty sure it's streaming now. But yeah, those are mine. I love Batman and Robin so much. Like, I really think it's an underrated gem, especially if you love the comics and the Golden Age stuff. So yeah, that's my controversial take, but the Batman, very high up. I think it's great.
Rosie, you just made this a very cool party. I'm just really excited about your ranking. I love your ranking so much. I watched Batman and Robin every Christmas. It absolutely, like, I prefer the Schumacher verse over some of the modern stuff. So
Me too.
absolutely, Schumacher super underrated. I think he's ready to be like his movies are ready to be reevaluated.
I've been trying.
Yeah, yeah.
I've written articles. Like I'm like, you watch this now and you're like, this is actually like so
That's
effing smart. Like there's a lot to be loved about it.
Yeah, that's the future DC Standom episode. Like, get it in the books. Re-examining Schumacher in defense of Schumacher. Me and Rosie, Schumacher Army.
I'll say
like
Batman. I'll just throw out Batman Forever, which is not in my top 5. It's a very entertaining movie for a lot of reasons. Batman and Robin, I think it's very enjoyable to watch as a piece of camp or kitsch. But yeah, I think you can defend Batman Forever. I'll leave it at that.
Also, the Schumacher films. I mean, we'll get back on subject. Sorry, just one more thing about the Schumacher films. But it is also one of the most beautifully realized versions of Gotham.
Yes.
Like, I just love that Gotham, the neon statuesque version, like over the top Gotham. I love that for the same reason that I love this movie.
Yeah.
Just like that impenetrable bubble city that no other thing could exist in. Like, I just love it.
John, your top 5.
All right. So subjectively, again, I think Batman Returns is probably my absolute favorite because it's the first Batman movie of my lifetime. It's the one I grew up with. Obviously, I love the Schumacher films. But objectively, I would have to say The Dark Knight is still sort of daddy for me. Like, that's sort of like the top one. And then the Batman. And then the other 2 Nolan ones are sort of interchangeable for me. They're just really, really great. And then the 5th one probably would be Batman Returns. It's sort of where I land on those.
David?
As to explain a little bit, The Dark Knight is one of the best movies ever made, I would argue. So that is still by far number 1. The reason I'm going to give the edge to Nolan a little bit more than Reeves after only one viewing of the Batman is when I need to revisit the Batman because it's that good. I want to see what I think about it in a little more time. But honestly, a lot of it's just personal preference. I think Pattinson's Bruce is great, but I do like the slightly more noble or more clear-headed Bruce played by Christian Bale. I like his warmth with Alfred. I do think that's still the best Alfred relationship. And I just like the way he did the villains. So basically, 1, The Dark Knight, 2, Batman Begins, 3, it's a toss-up for me between The Batman and Rises, but I might say objectively The Batman's the better movie, but I'd have to watch it again. 5, Batman Returns.
I'm having a tough time with this. What I texted David right after John and I saw the Batman was, I don't know if this is the best Batman movie ever, but it is a conversation worth having. And for years I've said, if you ask me my favorite James Bond movie, depending on what day you catch me on, I'm either going to tell you Casino Royale or I'm going to tell you From Russia with Love, right? Right now, depending on what day you catch me on, I'm either going to tell you the Batman or I'm going to tell you the Dark Knight. And it's been a couple years since I've watched the Dark Knight. Obviously, like, I'm super hyped about the Batman right now, so there might be some recency bias. But if I had to really go for this right now, I would go the Batman, Dark Knight, Begins, Rises, because I love Rises. Rises is underrated, folks. Rises gets a lot of heat. It's a good movie. And Batman 89. I'm not including Mask of the Phantasm, and I'm not including the Batman 66 movie, just because that complicates things. But I love those movies. Those are like pretty like formative, important Batman movies for me. But yeah, right now it's the Batman, Dark Knight, Begins, Rises, 89. And I do think the Batman will stand the test of time. Whether this is still everybody's favorite Batman movie or not in 6 months or a year's time remains to be seen. But this is a hell of an accomplishment, and it's the kind of superhero movie that only comes around every couple of years. And I can't wait to see what's next. This is the most hyped I've been about Batman as a franchise and as a character in a decade or more. So it's pretty cool stuff.
I just want to call out something that David said in his review, which I really loved. And I mean, we've discussed this on chat, David, but sort of, the idea that this movie's so good, but Christopher Nolan made The Dark Knight on his second time out. So like I'm just thinking about like what Reeves is going to do next. Like that to me could be the Batman movie, right? Like it could be the one.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that.
My few critiques of the Batman are, I think there are certain scenes, and not just at the end, where it feels like there was a note, make this more like The Dark Knight. And Batman Begins was very much following the formula put down by Richard Donner. And then that worked so well, the studio just let Nolan do whatever the hell he wanted on his second time out. So imagine what Reeves could do if, he doesn't have to follow any formula next time.
I can't wait to find out. But it looks like that is it for the inaugural episode of DC Standom, folks. If you tuned in late, don't worry, because this episode will be archived here on Twitch, or you can check it out at youtube.com/DenaGeekUS as of tomorrow. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you're watching. And if you don't want to look at me, and who could blame you, you'll be able to get this episode wherever you get your podcasts. We will have Matt Reeves talking about a big spoiler from the Batman. Mattson Tomlin will be talking about Batman the Imposter. Grant Morrison will be talking Superman with me, and much more. So make sure you keep an eye on DC Standom. Follow our Twitter account. We are at DC Standom on Twitter. And guess what? First 10 folks who follow us there right now, we're going to give you a copy of our the latest issue of Den Geek magazine with an exclusive Bill Sienkiewicz Batman cover and a story by John Saavedra. Anyway, a very special thanks to Rosie Knight for joining us for this. We hope to have you around again soon, Rosie. It's always good to see you. I love talking DC with you.
Yeah, it was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime.
I'm so excited for everyone to see this movie. Like, I love that even like David, who has like really thoughtful critiques, it's still just all of us being like, this is so cool. Like, even if there's something I would do differently, like that's a really great place to be. And I'm so excited for that to hopefully spread as the wider audiences get to see it.
Well, we'll get to talk about it more, I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to our producer, Andrew Halley, for making us look good and keeping me on track. Thanks to our social media coordinator, Lee Parham, for all his hard work moderating the comments and keeping us on our toes. Most of all, thanks to all of you for joining us. Until next time, stand together, folks. We'll see you soon.